Most people think success needs huge blocks of time. But a writer who bangs out 500 words every morning, or an athlete who commits to one focused hour of drills instead of random workouts, ends up far ahead a few months later because small, consistent effort builds into real output. Everyone says they are too busy. Yet 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week, adds up to 240 hours a year, enough to finish a course, ship a product prototype, or record an album, and that steady accumulation is what creates visible advantage. There's always friction: email, meetings, the pull of scroll. How that single hour is used changes everything, and the examples ahead show the difference between busy work and the kind of practice that opens doors, sharpens skill, and attracts opportunity. The 1 hour advantage: how consistency compounds in real life. Most people underestimate how much one focused hour adds up over time. An hour every day turns into hundreds of hours across months, and that steady investment changes the way a skill feels, how fast you can perform it, and what level of complexity you can handle without thinking. Consistency compounds. A language learner who spends an hour a day on conversation practice, for example, will maintain fluency and expand vocabulary faster than someone who studies sporadically, because the brain reinforces patterns through repetition. Showing up is harder than the work itself for many. When a musician runs scale drills for 60 minutes each day, the technique becomes automatic, and that automaticity frees mental space for expression, improvisation, and interpretation, things that make performance memorable rather than merely correct. Intensity doesn't replace regularity. Athletes who grind out a controlled hour of strength or mobility work regularly tend to avoid the boom and bust injuries that come from occasional marathon sessions, since the body adapts gradually and stays resilient. Small daily improvements stack into meaningful outcomes at work. A developer who dedicates an hour each morning to learning a new framework, refactoring a module, or writing tests sends their future self fewer emergencies and creates smoother teams, because code quality improves incrementally and colleagues can rely on steady progress rather than frantic patches. This changes reputations. Sales professionals who reserve an hour for outreach every day build pipelines that become predictably healthy, which lowers pressure at month end and allows them to pursue better opportunities instead of scrambling. The trick isn't finding an hour, it's making that hour non-negotiable in practice, not just in theory. Workers who place that hour at a stable time, treat it as an appointment on their calendar, and protect it from interruptions report clearer thinking and better outcomes, because distraction-free blocks allow deep focus and momentum to develop, and momentum makes the next session easier. Momentum matters. Over time, the 1 hour habit becomes a signal to others and to yourself, a reliable daily output that compounds into skill, trust, and opportunities. And that is how steady performers separate themselves without constant drama or heroic bursts of effort. Designing an hour that actually moves the needle. Work tends to expand to fill the time available. Parkinson's law explains why an hour can feel long and empty at the same time. People sit down intending to be productive and then drift into email, quick chats, or tinkering with formats. The trick that separates useful hours from wasted ones is picking one crisp, measurable outcome before the minute hand starts moving. A product manager might choose write the acceptance criteria for one feature. A copywriter might aim to finish a single article section. An engineer might focus on closing one ticket end to end. When the target is specific, decisions fall into place faster and the hour produces something tangible. Getting into flow often takes setup, and setup is where most of that hour disappears. Teams that block time for warm-up habits report smoother sessions, opening the exact repo, loading the design files, or skimming the relevant thread first. Without that small investment, the rest of the hour is context switching. A designer who spends 5 minutes to load all artboards and pin the reference images can do an uninterrupted revision. The hour then yields a finished pass instead of a half-started mock-up. Distractions are not just interruptions, they're productivity tax. Notifications, open tabs, and accessible messages create tiny breaks that add up to a broken hour. People who intentionally create friction for distractions, putting the phone in another room, turning off non-essential alerts, or closing unrelated tabs, regularly report finishing deeper work in the same time frame. A sales rep who silences email for a prospecting hour and keeps the script visible often completes targeted outreach that leads to real conversations later. The silent hour becomes the engine for follow-ups. Closing the hour with a brief review converts isolated effort into repeatable progress. When the output is checked against the initial outcome and the next step is noted, the hour informs the next session. Writers who end by jotting the next scene's first line, developers who leave a clear commit message and todo, and managers who record one key decision all shorten setup time for the next hour. Over weeks, those small closures compound, and an hour designed this way moves the needle because it consistently produces forward motion rather than noise, turning resistance into routine, reducing friction and building momentum. Small obstacles often stop plans more reliably than big barriers. The extra 10 seconds it takes to find your running shoes matters more than the fact that you know how to run. When a process requires several little decisions, choosing clothes, packing a bag, warming up, checking the route, each choice chips away at the intention until skipping feels like the easier option. That cumulative drag explains why the same person who can plan a month of workouts still misses more days than they'd expect. Notifications and habit friction are relentlessly practical. A phone that lights up during a focused task redirects attention before a decision about the task even forms. Turning off those interruptions, setting apps to silent, or moving the phone to another room removes an immediate choice point and makes the preferred behavior more likely to happen without internal negotiation. A concrete example is wardrobes for workouts. Shoes by the door and shorts on the chair lower the activation energy for exercise because the environment is already aligned with the action. New routines tend to cling to old ones. Brushing teeth is a stable anchor, slipping in 2 minutes of stretches after it leverages an existing cue. Implementation intentions, simple if-then plans like after first finish lunch, first write one paragraph, work because they specify a trigger and a small response, so the brain doesn't have to invent a moment to start. Many people find that leaving a book on the pillow or placing a glass of water on the desk creates the visible cue that turns intention into habit without a harsh reliance on willpower. Momentum grows from tiny, predictable wins rather than grand starts. Splitting an hour into 4 focused 15-minute blocks or promising a single low-friction action at the outset generates a pattern of completion that lowers resistance for the next session. Automation and templates play the same role. Automatic bill pay, calendar blocks that repeat, or email drafts that live in a folder remove repeating decisions and keep energy for the creative parts. Over time, those small, designed reductions in friction change what feels natural, and what felt like effort eventually becomes the path of least resistance. Measuring progress. What to track, what to ignore. Metrics multiply quickly when you commit an hour a day to improvement. It's easy to end up with a dashboard full of numbers that sound important but don't explain why something changed. Output metrics like total hours, word counts, or raw lines of code are simple facts, but they often miss quality, context, and cause. For example, a writer who tracks only daily word count can increase volume while outputting rougher drafts that require more editing. The apparent progress collapses into more work later. Leading indicators tied to the process are the ones that actually predict change. Musicians track tempo precision, number of slow, mistake-free repetitions, and error types rather than total practice time. Runners look at consistency of pace and cadence in comparable sessions instead of only weekly mileage. These signals let small course corrections happen immediately, because they sit directly on the causal path between action and outcome. A software developer who measures test coverage and mean time to fix bugs gets clearer feedback than someone counting commits, since those process metrics relate directly to code quality. Vanity metrics are loud and seductive but usually hollow. Likes, streak badges, raw minutes logged with distracted attention, or total tasks crossed off can create the feeling of momentum while substance declines. A salesperson with a rising call count and falling close rate is a common sight. The calls went up, results fell, and nobody learned why. When metrics are easy to gain, they encourage cosmetic changes instead of meaningful adjustments, and that wastes the hour you plan to invest. Data without frequent, structured review becomes wallpaper. Weekly or session-end notes that link the metric to a specific action reveal patterns that single snapshots miss. For example, a pianist's monthly video review can show that tempo steadiness improves only after adding targeted slow practice. Simple tools work. A brief log with date, focus area, one process metric, one outcome metric, and a short note captures cause and effect without overcomplication. Over time, trends emerge from those entries and they point to which behaviors to repeat and which to drop. Numbers tell part of the story, and subjective signals fill the rest. Confidence in execution, ability to explain a concept to someone else, or noticing fewer repeated errors are qualitative indicators that complement counts. A teacher noticing that a student can now teach a problem back is as informative as a quiz score. Combining a few robust quantitative measures with 1 or 2 qualitative check-ins keeps the picture complete and prevents small, misleading metrics from steering the whole effort. Real stories. Ordinary people who used an hour to change their trajectories. Most people complain about not having time, and that complaint hides a neat truth. An hour is a different animal than a vague someday. People who joined the Hour of Code movement as students often say that a single guided hour turned curiosity into a class choice. That one-session exposure didn't magically make engineers, but it changed course selections and opened doors to elective classes, internships, and college majors for some who had never considered tech before. Commuting and lunch breaks feel wasted, and some ordinary folks decided to reclaim them. A barista who spent lunch hours following web design tutorials slowly built a portfolio with weekend client work. The portfolio made interviews easier, and the first freelance paycheck replaced a few shifts. That steady momentum led to a permanent remote position later on. Parents juggling childcare think progress requires big blocks of time, yet a parent recorded short language lessons during nap time and posted them weekly. Listeners gradually found the show, and guest invitations followed. Those conversations turned into consulting requests and speaking gigs that shifted the person's professional identity away from a job that never fit. People stuck in routine jobs often tell the same story. They wrote for an hour before bed to chip away at a book. Sending a single chapter to a small magazine got a reply. That acceptance built confidence, and more submissions followed. A side habit morphed into paid writing assignments and a new income stream. Workers who feared they couldn't break into tech used an hour each day to complete modules on an online course platform. Incremental progress made interviews plausible. Employers noticed projects on GitHub that started as hourly experiments, and those projects became talking points that changed hiring decisions. A retired teacher tried an hour of resume rewriting and networking each morning because the idea of change felt overwhelming. Reaching out to former colleagues produced a volunteer role, which led to a paid consultancy. The effect was simple, focused, consistent effort during otherwise idle time created opportunities that casual intentions never did. Skeptics assume an hour is too small to move the needle, but concrete outcomes tell another story. 1 hour habits produced portfolios, podcasts, published pieces, skills, and networks. The mechanism is cause and effect. Concentrated repetitions create visible artifacts, and those artifacts invite new choices. The path from hobby to profession is rarely dramatic. It's built on hours stacked into momentum. You ever watch someone get noticeably better and wonder how it happened so fast? We covered the simple pattern. 1 focused hour day beats sporadic marathons because it builds habit, momentum, and measurable progress. Practicing guitar for 60 minutes 3 times a week rarely matches 60 minutes every day, and the difference shows in smoother chords, cleaner code, and faster mile times. It's not magic. Small, consistent actions pile up into big changes. If you've started and then stalled before, you're not alone. Weekend courses, intense bursts, and busy weeks interrupt the learning loop, and that's why progress stalls. Skills need repetition to stick, like memorizing vocabulary or drilling free throws in the same gym. When you see others improving, it's usually not more talent, it's more steady practice. If this landed for you, try a short experiment instead of a promise you won't keep. Pick 1 hour, set a simple tracker, and give it 2 weeks. Maybe morning writing for 60 minutes, or an evening coding hour with a clear tiny goal, and watch how focus and confidence change what you do next. Small commitment, visible results. If you're curious about what that looks like in real life, first I'll share a real 30-day log next. A beginner piano student's daily notes, a coder's before and after projects, and the small adjustments that kept them going. Hope to see you there and hear what an hour a day changes for you.